This training is made possible by a grant from the Utah State Charter School Board. On behalf of the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, welcome to this brief training on how to purchase items using state funds, or procurement. In this training, we will cover the laws and rules regarding procurement. We will talk about procurement ethics. We will discuss the main purchasing thresholds and when a quote or RFP is required. We will look at some examples, and finally, we will wrap up with some do's and don'ts. This training is only an introduction to procurement. Please be familiar with the law that governs purchasing. You can find the law at le.utah.gov. In the search bar, type 63G-6A. This is the code reference. Once there, you can download it and save, or you can read it online. You may want to download it so that you don't have to memorize the code number. This training will provide the most critical parts of the code for day-to-day operations. Charter schools are independent procurement authorities. An independent procurement authority is an agency which is independent of the Division of Purchasing, aka state purchasing. An independent procurement authority, however, is not independent of the Utah Procurement Code. SB 184 of the 2016 legislative session made some significant changes to the procurement code. Basically, it made the entire law applicable to almost all conditions in which state money is making the purchase. Although the law provides for exemptions, the exemptions rarely apply. The biggest place where exemptions may apply is when making purchases with grant money. Even so, it is best to follow procurement law and rule in all transactions to avoid issues. Recall that schools are subject to laws, rules, and policy. Laws are the broadest form of governance. Rule further defines the law. All public schools are subject to Administrative Rule R33. School policy can, if the board chooses to, adopt policy that further limits an entity's procurement. For instance, your school can determine that if they want to limit their small purchases to $350 rather than the $1,000 allowed in rule. Or the school board could create policy that requires buyers to get specific signatures on paperwork prior to purchases. Of course, the school can adopt policy in line with rule. Because there is so much to state purchasing, I want to direct you to the division's webpage. On this site, there is a section specific for agencies, which your school is one. Start here to find lots of support for your school. You can access trainings which will take each portion of the code and break it down, as well as flow charts and other resources. The division employees are very helpful and will even post your solicitations for you as needed. There's also a page for forms which you can borrow and modify as needed. State contracts can be an easy and effective way to conduct procurement. Basically, with state contracts, the state has done the work for you. On the same webpage, click on State Contracts. Then you can navigate the sections. Time is money, and so sometimes it is faster to use a state contract. However, sometimes you can get a better deal doing the work yourself. Either way, it's worth a look here first before you start any projects, because if it's on the state contract, you can simply purchase it off the existing contract. As a nonprofit board, spending state funds, each year you should declare any real or potential conflicts of interest. This is even more critical during purchasing. Nepotism is favoritism granted in politics or business to relatives. Also, the use of authority or influence to show favoritism to a relative. Avoid it. Cronyism is a form of favoritism where contracts or purchase orders are awarded on the basis of friendships, associations, or political connections instead of fair and open competition. Avoid it. Does this mean you can't do business with friends or family even when it's the best deal? Well, although it looks bad, you actually can if you follow the law. Declare all potential conflicts and then recuse yourself during the discussion and the vote. It is not worth the potential issues. Even bad press is not worth it, but it could also end up being a felony. There are 3 basic rules you need to be aware of. The first is the no quote rule. If individual items are less than $1,000 each and the total cost of the purchase is less than $5,000 total, then you do not need to get any quotes or bids. You can simply shop. If there are items in the purchase that exceed $1,000 or the total is more than $5,000, then you must obtain competitive quotes. 2 are required, 3 is best. Keep documentation of all the quotes you receive. If the total of the purchase will exceed $50,000, you must complete the request for proposal or bid process. For day-to-day operations, the no-quote small purchase rule is used frequently. Let's look at it in practice. To be able to use the small purchase rule, no quotes required, the procurement must stay within 3 thresholds. First, the individual procurement threshold. The cost for each individual item is less than $1,000. The first requirement for the small purchase no quote rule has been met. The second threshold is the single procurement aggregate threshold. The single procurement aggregate threshold is $5,000 total spent in a single procurement, with all individual items being under $1,000. An agency can buy as many items under $1,000 at one time if they are not spending more than $5,000 total in that single purchase. In our example, the school needed 4 of each item. The total for all items is $4,671.40. The school verified that shipping, delivery, setup, etc. were all included in the price. So the second requirement for the small purchase no quote rule has been met. The final threshold is the annual cumulative threshold. An agency cannot spend more than $50,000 with a single vendor in 1 year using the small purchase no quote required rule. Provided I had not already spent $45,328 with this vendor, I am okay to purchase my supplies. This procurement example is the same as on the previous slide. However, when the school asked the vendor about delivery costs, the agency learned that delivery is extra. With delivery added, the total is over the $5,000 procurement authority granted for small purchases no quote required. Competitive bids must be obtained from multiple vendors, and the lowest that meets the specifications must be selected. The school may not split the procurement. If they know that they need 4 of each, then they need to buy all of them. They may not buy some items now and some later in order to stay under the small purchase threshold of $5,000. They may not buy the items with using 2 different stores. They may not buy the items on 2 different invoices today. They must buy what they need all at once. Remember that when you need to purchase individual items costing over $1,000.01 or a total shopping cart of over $5,000, you must first obtain at least 2 competitive quotes, although 3 is best. The school must accept the lowest bid that has the items you want and can be delivered by the time needed. Keeping documentation and clear records of your quote process is critical. The state offers a telephone quotation sheet online at purchasing.utah.gov under heading Purchasing Forms. Before requesting quotes, the individual should read and understand the general information document that comes with the telephone quotation sheet. This form is not mandatory, but it is a nice resource which meets all the requirements. Recall, when a single purchase is going to exceed $50,000, you must participate in a formal solicitation process, typically through a request for proposal or a request for bid. This is a long process and takes some effort to complete, including a requirement to publicly post the solicitation for at least 7 days, so plan ahead. The state will post your listing on the procurement site for you. The law has one interesting exception, and that is when you are contracting with professional service providers and consultants. Their services may be procured up to a maximum of $100,000 by direct negotiation after reviewing the qualifications of a minimum of 3 firms or individuals. Don't hesitate to contact the state for help. They provide a ton of resources and training on all procurement topics, including on RFPs. If this is new to you, reach out and make sure you conduct your RFP process correctly the first time. It will save you effort and eliminate potential issues down the road. To wrap up, let's review some do's and don'ts. Do purchase items under $1,000 as needed. Do obtain competitive bids when the cost is between $1,000 to $50,000. Do follow the RFP process when the cost is $50,000 plus. Do have a school process for approving and tracking purchases and quotes. Do keep detailed paperwork and proof. Do follow code and rule. Don't artificially divide bids or try to get around the procurement steps. Don't accept gratuities or kickbacks from vendors during any procurement process. Don't take shortcuts. Don't have conflicts. Don't be afraid to get help. During this training, we've covered the essential details for how to purchase items using state funds. We covered the laws and rules regarding procurement. We reviewed purchasing ethics. We discussed the main purchasing thresholds and when a quote or RFP is required. We looked at some examples, and finally we wrapped up with some do's and don'ts. Please ensure that anyone in your school responsible for procurement is familiar with the obligations and takes the time to delve into procurement in detail. We wish you all the best in running your school.